Thank you. Here you are in Folkestone, UK, south east of London, and we're with Priyakun Prabhu, and we're with Shyam Kishore Prabhu, with Shangori Mataji, and Saint, and Cook, and chief taker-carer of all devotees. And we're reading, I'm not going to go back to a special place. We're reading right from where we left off, and I'm just reading straight through the Gita. So we're reading Bhagavad-Gita as it is, chapter 14, beginning with text 21. Arjuna Uvacha Kairlingaistrin Gunanitan Atito Bhavati Prabho Kimma Charakatam Chaitangs Tringunan Ativartate. Arjuna inquired, O my dear Lord, by which symptoms is one known who is transcendental to these three modes? What is his behavior? And how does he transcend the modes of nature? Purport. In this verse, Arjuna's questions are very appropriate. He wants to know the symptoms of a person who has already transcended the material modes. He first inquires of the symptoms of such a transcendental person. How can one understand that he has already transcended the influence of the modes of material nature? The second question asks how he lives and what his activities are. Are they regulated or non-regulated? Then Arjuna inquires of the means by which he can attain the transcendental nature. That is very important. Unless one knows the direct means by which one can be situated always transcendentally, there is no possibility of showing the symptoms. So all these questions put by Arjuna are very important, and the Lord answers them. Text 22 to 25. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prakasham Cha Pravritim Cha Moham Eva Cha Bhandava Na Dveshti Sampravritani Na Nivritani Kankshati Udasina Vadasino Gunaryo Na Vichalyate Guna Vartanta It Evam Yovatishtate Nengate Samadhuka Sukha Swasta Somalashtrashmakanchanaha Tulya Priya Piyo Dhiras Tulya Nindatma Sanstutihi Mana Pamanayos Tulyas Tulyo Mitrari Bhakshayoho Sarvarambha Padityagi Gunati Daksa Uchite. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O son of Pandu, he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, or long for them when they disappear, who is unwavering and undisturbed through all these reactions of the material qualities, remaining neutral and transcendental, knowing that the modes alone are active, who is situated in the self and regards alike happiness and distress, who looks upon a lump of earth, a stone, and a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is equal toward the desirable and the undesirable, who is steady, situated equally well in praise and blame, honor and dishonor, who treats alike both friend and enemy, and who has renounced all material activities. Such a person is said to have transcended the modes of nature. Purport. Arjuna submitted 3 different questions, and the Lord answers them one after another. In these verses, Krishna first indicates that a person transcendentally situated has no envy and does not hanker for anything. When a living entity stays in this material world, embodied by the material body, it is to be understood that he is under the control of one of the 3 modes of material nature. When he is actually out of the body, when he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature, then he is out of the clutches of the material modes of nature. But as long as he is not out of the material body, he should be neutral. He should engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord so that his identity with the material body will automatically be forgotten. When one is conscious of the material body, he acts only for sense gratification. But when one transfers the consciousness to Krishna, sense gratification automatically stops. One does not need this material body, and he does not need to accept the dictations of the material body. The qualities of the material modes in the body will act, but as spirit soul, the self is aloof from such activities. How does he become aloof? He does not desire to enjoy the body, nor does he desire to get out of it. Thus, transcendentally situated, the devotee becomes automatically free. He need not try to become free from the influence of the modes of material nature. The next question concerns the dealings of a transcendentally situated person. The materially situated person is affected by so-called honor and dishonor offered to the body, but the transcendentally situated person is not affected by such false honor and dishonor. He performs his duty in Krishna consciousness and does not mind whether a man honors or dishonors him. He accepts things that are favorable for his duty in Krishna consciousness, and otherwise he has no necessity of anything material, either a stone or gold. He takes everyone as his dear friend and helps him in his execution of Krishna consciousness, and does not hate his so-called enemy. He is equally disposed and sees everything on an equal level because he knows perfectly well that he has nothing to do with material existence. Social and political issues do not affect him because he knows the situation of temporary upheavals and disturbances. He does not attempt anything for his own sake. He can attempt anything for Krishna, but for his personal self, he does not attempt anything. By such behavior, one becomes actually transcendentally situated. Text 26. Mam chayo bhyabhicharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samati jaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and comes to the level of Brahman. Purport. This verse is a reply to Arjun's third question. What is the means of attaining to the transcendental position? As explained before, the material world is acting under the spell of the modes of material nature. One should not be disturbed by the activities of the modes of nature. Instead of putting his consciousness into such activities, he may transfer his consciousness to Krishna activities. Krishna activities are known as Bhakti Yoga, always acting for Krishna. This includes not only Krishna, but his different plenary expansions, such as Rama and Narayana. He has innumerable expansions. One who is engaged in the service of any of the forms of Krishna, or of his plenary expansions, is considered to be transcendentally situated. One should also note that all the forms of Krishna are fully transcendental, blissful, full of knowledge, and eternal. Such personalities of Godhead are omnipotent and omniscient, and they possess all transcendental qualities. So if one engages himself in the service of Krishna or his plenary expansions with unfailing determination, although these modes of nature are very difficult to overcome, one can overcome them easily. This has already been explained in the 7th chapter. One who surrenders unto Krishna at once surmounts the influence of the modes of material nature. To be in Krishna consciousness or in devotional service means to acquire equality with Krishna. The Lord says that His nature is eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge, and the living entities are part and parcel of the Supreme, as gold particles are part of a gold mine. Thus the living entity in his spiritual position is as good as gold, as good as Krishna in quality. The difference of individuality continues, otherwise there would be no question of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means that the Lord is there, the devotee is there, and the activity of exchange of love between the Lord and the devotee is there. Therefore, the individuality of two persons is present in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the individual person. Otherwise, there would be no meaning to Bhakti Yoga. If one is not situated in the same transcendental position with the Lord, one cannot serve the Supreme Lord. To be a personal assistant to a king, one must acquire the qualifications. Thus, the qualification to become Brahman or freed from all material contamination. Thus, the qualification is to become Brahman or freed from all material contamination. This is a good example of what just happened to me. I read that just a little wrong and it changed the meaning. Thus, the qualification is to become Brahman. The qualification to become, if I messed out is, and I said the qualification to become Brahman or freed from it, and it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't say anything. Every word is important. To get every word and take it in and understand it, properly. Very important. Thus, the qualification is to become Brahman, or freed from all material contamination. It is said in the Vedic literature, Brahmaiva san Brahmapyeti. One can attain the Supreme Brahman by becoming Brahman. This means that one must qualitatively become one with Brahman. By attainment of Brahman, one does not lose his eternal Brahman identity as an individual soul. Text 27. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyayasya cha shasvatasya cha dharmasya sukasya kantikasya cha. And I am the basis of the impersonal Brahman, which is immortal, imperishable, and eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. Purport. The constitution of Brahman is immortality, imperishability, eternity, and happiness. Brahman is the beginning of transcendental realization. Paramatma, the Supersoul, is the middle, the second stage in transcendental realization, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate realization of the Absolute Truth. Therefore, both Paramatma and the impersonal Brahman are within the Supreme Person. It is explained in the 7th chapter that material nature is the manifestation of the inferior energy of the Supreme Lord. The Lord impregnates the inferior material nature with fragments of the superior nature, and that is the spiritual touch in the material nature. When the living entity conditioned by this material nature begins the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, he elevates himself from the position of material existence and gradually rises up to the Brahman conception of the Supreme. This attainment of the Brahman conception of life is the first stage in self-realization. At this stage, the Brahman realized person is transcendental to the material position, but he is not actually perfect in Brahman realization. If he wants, he can continue to stay in the Brahman position and then gradually rise up to Paramatma realization and then to the realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There are many examples of this in Vedic literature. The 4 Kumaras are situated first in the impersonal Brahman, conception of truth, but then they gradually rose to the platform of devotional service. One who cannot elevate himself beyond the impersonal conception of Brahman runs the risk of falling down. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that although a person may rise to the stage of impersonal Brahman without going further, with no information of the Supreme Person, his intelligence is not perfectly clear. Therefore, in spite of being raised to the Brahman platform, there is a chance of falling down if one is not engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. I had to tell a story at that point. In 1975, Prabhupada came to Atlanta, Georgia, and all the brahmacharis from the Radha Damodar party gathered there. And during the darshan, there must have been, 80 brahmacharis. The same room with Prabhupada. He was in ecstasy. That was when he started to talk about Gaur Nitai being so beautiful and started to cry and couldn't continue. And then he had to wait for later in the day. Anyway, everyone was there, and one of the leaders of the temple told Prabhupada, we're worried because, this was in front of everyone, because, devotees are falling down while distributing your books. Prabhupada looked at him and he laughed. He said, they're not falling down from distributing my books. They're falling down when they stop distributing my books. And it was so funny because we all knew, because if you've gone out in Sankirtan any time, what to speak of, like for years, you'll know that as soon as you stop, then the material energy comes in, and then anything can happen. You don't know. But as long as you keep doing it, even though it's hard, then after a while you attain this kind of state where you feel like you're in the safest position you can be in, because you're doing something that you know for a fact is pleasing to Prabhupada and to Krishna. So here Prabhupada says, therefore, in spite of being raised to the Brahman platform, there is a chance of falling down if one is not engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Vedic language, it is also said, Raso vai sa, rasam evayam labha nandi babati. When one understands the personality of Godhead, the reservoir of pleasure, Krishna, he actually becomes transcendently blissful. The Supreme Lord is full in 6 opulences, and when a devotee approaches him, there is an exchange of these 6 opulences. The servant of the king enjoys on almost equal level with the king, on an almost equal level with the king. And so eternal happiness, imperishable happiness, and eternal life accompany devotional service. Therefore, realization of Brahman, or eternity, or imperishability, is included in devotional service. This is already possessed by a person who is engaged in devotional service. The living entity, although Brahman by nature, has the desire to lord it over the material world, and due to this he falls down. In his constitutional position, a living entity is above the 3 modes of material nature, but association with material nature entangles him in the different modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Due to the association of these 3 modes, his desire to dominate the material world is there. By engagement in devotional service, in full Krishna consciousness, he is immediately situated in the transcendental position, and his unlawful desire to control material nature is removed. Therefore, the process of devotional service, beginning with hearing, chanting, remembering the prescribed 9 methods for realizing devotional service, should be practiced in the association of devotees. Gradually, by such association, by the influence of the spiritual master, one's material desire to dominate is removed, and one becomes firmly situated in the Lord's transcendental loving service. This method is prescribed from the 22nd to the last verse of this chapter. Devotional service to the Lord is very simple. One should always engage in the service of the Lord, should eat the remnants of foodstuffs, offer to the deity, smell the flowers, offer to the lotus feet of the Lord, see the places where the Lord has had his transcendental pastimes, read of the different activities of the Lord, his reciprocation of love with his devotees, chant always the transcendental vibration, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Observe the fasting days, commemorating the appearances and disappearances of the Lord and His devotees. By following such a process, one becomes completely detached from all material activities. One who can thus situate himself in the Brahmajyoti, or the different varieties of the Brahman conception, is equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in quality. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad-Gita in the matter of the three modes of material nature. So, I think we'll go on. Take a vote. Chapter 15, the yoga, and then we'll have reflections afterwards, at the end. Chapter 15, the yoga of the Supreme Person. And in this text, there's a little blurb in the front. The ultimate purpose of Vedic knowledge is to detach oneself from the entanglement of the material world and to understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who understands Krishna's supreme identity surrenders unto Him and engages into His devotional service. Text 1, the Yoga of the Supreme Person. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhva Mulam Adat Shakam Ashwatam Prahurabhyayam Chandangsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "It is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas." Purport. After the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. Congratulations. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end. And for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns, meant for elevating oneself, are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. This process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment. Whoops. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Still going on. We're all right so far. Hare Krishna. This process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Now, there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and roots upward, but there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree. And from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, then the 3 gunas, then the 5 gross elements, Pancha, Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dashendriya, mind, and so on. In this way they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is the manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. The material world is the perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself, and that is explained in Bhagavad-Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. So beautiful. Prabhupada. Text 2. Adas chodvam prashishtas tasya shaka guna pravrida vishaya pravalaha adas jamolan yanusantatani karmanubandini manushaloke. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. Purport. The description of the banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, and so on. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas, and many other higher species of life. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the 3 modes of material nature. Sometimes we find that a tract of land is barren for want of sufficient water, and sometimes the tract is very green. Similarly, When particular modes of nature are proportionally greater in quantity, the different species of life are manifested accordingly. The twigs of the tree are considered to be the sense objects. By development of the different modes of nature, we develop different senses, and by the senses we enjoy different varieties of sense objects. And by this, the tips of the branches are the senses, the ears, nose, eyes, and so on, which are attached to the enjoyment of different sense objects. The twigs are sound, form, touch, and so on, the sense objects. The subsidiary roots are attachments and aversions, which are byproducts of different varieties of suffering and sense enjoyment. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the results of virtuous activities in the upper planetary systems, he comes down to this earth and renews his karma, or fruitive activities, for promotion. This planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. That means that the planet Earth is the place where you accrue karma, good or bad. And the other planetary systems are where you use up those reactions, good or bad. Below bad, above good. And when you use up those, then you have to come back down to the earth. So the earth is the gateway. And then in the Bhagavad-Gita, Sanatana Goswami says further than that Vrindavan on the earth is the only gateway to the spiritual world. I mean, it's possible to go to the spiritual world from the higher planets, but it's very rare because the sense gratification is so bewildering that they don't even think about it. Their desire to control and enjoy, and they have tremendous facilities for that, more than we do. So this is what's the word? This is the way we become neutral to these things that we were talking about before we started reading. All the things that are going on, all the huge, this historic event that just happened. This is a 1,000-year event. 1,000-year event that just happened in Houston. So by seeing all these things, both very good and very bad, then you're meant to, by hearing Vedic, being with devotees, you're beginning to say, whoa, wait a second. Either way, either way, we have to stay here in the material world and suffer. So this planet of human beings is considered the field of activities. Text 3 and 4. Narupam asyehan tato palabhyate nanto nachadir nachasam pratishta ashwatam enam subirudamulam asangashastrena didhena tritva tatak padam tat parimargitavyam yasmin katana nivartanti bhuya tameva chadyam purusham prapadye yatak pavriti prachishta purani. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. What a translation. I was realizing when I was in Houston reading the Antya-lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita that the English was so sweet and nectarian. It was as good as the Sanskrit. For us, better, because we can't understand the Sanskrit. I've lived in India for a long time, and I've read a lot of things, especially when I was editing books for Shiva and Maharaj and Gopi Pranadana Prabhu. There's so many elevated literatures and everything, and people translating this, translating that. But the English is just, it's not accessible like Prabhupada's English. It doesn't move you like Prabhupada's English. It doesn't allow you to. Many times they leave Sanskrit words in that they don't know how to translate, and leave it to you to come to them to find out what it means, rather than just give you the whole thing. And Prabhupada just gives us the whole thing. He doesn't translate, just literally he translates, phrases where words are difficult to understand. Very, very rarely he won't translate a Sanskrit word. Very rarely. Such a beautiful translation. I'm going to read it again, don't mind. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began, and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial.
You just change.
Yeah, sure. We have to get another wire. Okay, hold on, we're taking a break. Just don't mind. What? No. No. It's some people have to look. What do we do to put it on hold? Just put it on hold. That's it?
I know just if you put it on.
Because I have the right chords, but I don't have them out because this computer I got has new connections. And see they're down there.
Okay.
Oh, it's still going on. Hare Krishna.
Oh, no.
We're just setting up the couch which just fell apart. Don't worry. We'll be right back, folks. Where did I put the one I was reading from? Oh, there it is. Okay. Just had a little intermission, don't mind. Oh, I see. What you have to do is you have to push that button and then push it again. I'm learning how to record this for myself because I've been neglecting for 45 years. Don't mind. Hare Krishna. Purport. Really, I couldn't. It never came into my mind to do this. Purport. It is now clearly stated that the real form of this banyan tree cannot be understood in this material world. Since the root is upwards, the extension of the real tree is at the other end. When entangled with the material expansions of the tree, one cannot see how far the tree extends, nor can one see the beginning of this tree. Yet one has to find out the cause. I am the son of my father. My father is the son of such and such person, and so on. By searching in this way, one comes to Brahma, who is generated by the Garbhadakashaya Vishnu. Finally, in this way, when one reaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that is the end of research work. One has to search out that origin of this tree, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the association of persons who are in knowledge of that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then by understanding, one becomes gradually detached from this false reflection of reality, and by knowledge one can cut off the connection and actually become situated in the real tree. The word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material nature is very strong. Therefore one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion and the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Haribol. Then the first thing one must do is surrender to Him. First thing. The description of that place, whence having gone, one never returns to this false reflected tree, is given here. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the original root from whom everything has emanated. To gain favor of that personality of Godhead, one has only to surrender, and this is a result of performing devotional service by hearing, chanting, and so on. He is the cause of the extension of the material world. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, he becomes detached automatically from this material extension. So just notice that every time he mentions the process of devotional service, he says, by hearing, chanting, and so on. Very seldom does he give all 9 or even more than hearing and chanting, because the hearing and chanting activates all the other services. Without the hearing and chanting properly and sufficiently, the other activities of devotional service become mundane after some time, and even a burden. Satsvarup Maharaj received a letter from Srila Prabhupada in 1972 in Dallas. I was just there. And in Prabhupada's answer, Satsvarup Maharaj, I didn't read the letter, but it was obviously that he was asking about some problem in the deity worship department. That happens sometimes. And Prabhupada said, if one doesn't hear and chant properly, then even if he's dressing the deities, it will be as if he's dressing dolls. Therefore the taste doesn't come, and the relief that Prabhupada's talking about here doesn't come so much. Of course, it also says that if you perfect any one of the processes of devotional service, that's enough to take you back to Godhead. But because of this emphasis on the hearing and chanting, we can know that it's very difficult to perfect the process of one of them unless one's heard properly. This has already been explained by the Lord Himself. Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Therefore, to get out of the entanglement of this strong banyan tree of material life, one must surrender to Krishna. As soon as one surrenders unto Krishna, he becomes detached automatically from this material extension. Text 5. Nirmana moha jitasanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritya maha dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha sangyar gacchanta muda padamavyayam tat. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender under the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Purport. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the Lord of material nature, it is very difficult for him to surrender under the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not Lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated and is always in trouble. I gotta read this again. This is so succinct and so deep, but simple. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions, such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge. Then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I had this realization. I wrote about it. You probably read it already, but I'm going to repeat it face to face because it was really meaningful. Because here it says, when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions, such as happiness, distress, pleasure, and pain. So sometimes the material nature, by the direction of Krishna, will cause us such difficulty that we were forced to see it. And that happened to me when I was almost out of my body. You know, it was, I couldn't, my senses weren't connecting very much with the outside world because that fever, which lasted, by the way, for 50 days, typhoid fever, it's crazy. It just took all the water out of the body, and then Guru Bhakti did the first blood work when I went down to Houston, and the first blood work showed that I had very little water in my blood. When you have no water in your blood, you're dead. That's it. You're somewhere else. You're not there anymore. So, but I kept up this reading like this every night for at least an hour. And I was doing Antulila, Chaitanya Charitamrita. I did it 3 times, right in a row. And I was sitting there in this chair, and all of a sudden I was forced. This has nothing to do with some kind of spiritual attainment on my part. Maybe it was arranged by Krishna to help me, but I was forced. I saw with my own eyes that I had nothing. I possessed absolutely nothing. And I didn't think I could leave it any second. I wasn't thinking like that, but I just knew that I had nothing. And then when I got to that, when that physical force put me in that situation, I started to hear out loud my own voice, and I was alone in the room. I wasn't reading to anyone. And I read, and I'm telling you, as sure as I'm sitting here on this couch, the quality of the change, the sound changed. You know, and The words were the same, but it's so deep. I actually heard, I don't know, maybe for the first time, and then all of a sudden, the suffering I was going through, and it was intense, believe me, it just went, whoo, just like that, and it was gone. And then I heard these wonderful, loving relationships between Lord Chaitanya and his associates, and I wanted to go there so bad. It was like excruciatingly intense desire. And then I realized, this is hearing. This is what hearing means. We have to hear as if our life depended on it. You know. And then Krishna, from inside, okay, yeah, fine. Okay, you got it, finally. I had to beat you over the head, you know, until you're practically smashed to smithereens. Now you finally got it. But without Prabhupada, without these purports, you know, so clear, so succinct, so deeply realized, what would have happened? Where would we be? You know, Houston is the 4th largest city in America. I'm not sure what that means. It's at least around the area, 20 million, something like that. The metropolitan area, at least 8 or 9, 10. .8 inches of rain in a very short period of time. And they're thinking they're controllers. They're thinking they're going to do something to, you know, conquer nature. I mean, it's so ridiculous, actually. Anyway, we're just so fortunate. You know, we need to cultivate this gratitude, and Krishna will help us. He'll help us, put us in situations if you're in such distress, and you go there and just surrender. Oh, Krishna, okay. Then he'll relieve us and give us something wonderful in return that you cannot pay back, you cannot do anything to, you know, just be super grateful and try to give other people this nectar. That's it. Sorry, got carried away. Hare Krishna. Text 6. Tad nat tad basyate suryo dashashanko napavakaha yadgatva nanivartante tad dhamma paramam mama. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Purport. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. Did you notice? I don't know if you know about the news, but they had a solar eclipse in America. I mean, everybody could see. I mean, not everyone, but through the center of America, so many people could see the full eclipse. And they have pictures where there were thousands of people with their special glass looking up and going like that. And you could see that they were worshiping. They were actually, many people said, this was the event of my life. You know, and yet the scholars are picking apart these cultures that have worshipped the sun, you know, or have some kind of that understanding. But it was so clear. Because without the sun, what they could do? Absolutely nothing. Couldn't see. Can't even see. We're thinking we're God or we're going to conquer the world, these people. The shining effulgence of all those planets called Vaikunthas constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahmajyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. As long as a living entity is in this dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated. Then there is no chance of his coming back here. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the lord of this material world. But in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full knowledge. One should be captivated by this information. This is a very important statement. This is the mentality that will take us forward. One should be captivated by this information. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. One has to associate himself with devotees, those who are in Krishna consciousness. One should search out a society dedicated to Krishna consciousness and learn how to discharge devotional service. In this way, he can cut off his attachment to the material world. One cannot become detached from attraction to the material world simply by dressing himself in saffron cloth. He must become attached to the devotional service of the Lord. Therefore, one should take it very seriously that devotional service, as described in the 12th chapter, is the only way to get out of this false representation of the real tree. In chapter 14, the combination of all kinds of processes by material nature is described. Only devotional service is described as purely transcendental. The words paramam mama are very important here. Actually, every nook and corner is the property of the Supreme Lord, but the spiritual world is paramam, full of 6 opulences. The Katha Upanishad also confirms that in the spiritual world there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, or stars. Natatra suryo bhati na chandratarakam. For the whole spiritual sky is illuminated by the internal potency of the Supreme Lord. That supreme abode can be achieved only by surrender and by no other means. Text 7. Mamevang shod jiva loke jiva bhutat sanatanaham manat shastranindrayani prakritishtani karshati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Purport. In this verse, the identity of the living entity is clearly given. The living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life, and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. He is eternally fragmented. It is clearly said, Sanatana. According to the Vedic version, the Supreme Lord manifests and expands himself in innumerable expansions, of which the primary expansions are called Vishnu Tattva and the secondary expansions are called the living entities. In other words, the Vishnu Tattva is the personal expansion, and the living entities are the separated expansions. By his personal expansion, he is manifested in various forms, like Lord Rama, Nrsingadev, Vishnu Murti, and all the predominating deities in the Vaikuntha planets. The separated expansions, the living entities, are eternally servitors. The personal expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the individual identities of the Godhead, are always present. Similarly, the separated expansions of living entities have their identities. As fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, the living entities also have fragmental portions of his qualities, of which independence is one. Every living entity, as an individual soul, has his personal individuality and a minute form of independence. By misuse of that independence, one becomes a conditioned soul. And by proper use of independence, he is also liberated. In either case, he is qualitatively eternal, as the Supreme Lord is. In his liberated state, he is freed from this material condition, and he is under the engagement of transcendental service unto the Lord. In his conditioned life, he is dominated by the material modes of nature, and he forgets the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As a result, he has to struggle very hard to maintain his existence in the material world. The living entities, not only human beings and the cats and dogs, but even the greater controllers of the material world, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and even Vishnu, are all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. They are all eternal, not temporary manifestations. The word karshati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled by iron chains. He is bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in this material existence. When the mind is in the mode of goodness, his activities are good. When the mind is in the mode of passion, his activities are troublesome. And when the mind is in the mode of ignorance, he travels in the lower species of life. It is clear, however, in this verse, that the conditioned soul is covered by the material body, with the mind and the senses, and when he is liberated, this material covering perishes, but his spiritual body manifests itself in its individual capacity. The following information is there in the Madhyanadinayana Shruti. Sava Esha Brahmanishta Idam Sharira Martyam Atishrija Brahma Bisampadya Brahmana Pashyati Brahmana Shinoti Brahmanaya Vidam Sarvam Anubhavati. It is stated here that when a living entity gives up this material embodiment and enters into the spiritual world, he revives his spiritual body. And in his spiritual body, he can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. He can hear and speak to him face to face. And he can understand the Supreme Personality as he is. From Smriti, also it is understood, Vasanti Yatra Purushak Sarve Vaikunta Mortaya. In the spiritual planets, everyone lives in bodies featured like the Supreme Personality of Godheads. As far as bodily construction is concerned, there is no difference between the part and parcel living entities and the expansions of Vishnumurti. Man is created in the image of God. In other words, at liberation, the living entity gets a spiritual body by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The words Mamai Vangsha, fragmental parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, are also very significant. The fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. This fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. that conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatana, eternal, is used. The fragmental portion is eternal. It is also stated in the beginning of the second chapter that in each and every individual body, the fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord is present. Dehino spin, yata dehe. That fragmental portion, when liberated from the bodily entanglement, revives its original spiritual body in a spiritual sky, in a spiritual planet, and enjoys association with the Supreme Lord. It is, however, understood here that the living entity, being the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, is qualitatively one with the Lord, just as the parts and parcels of gold are also gold. Text 8. Are we still with us over there? Yes. Okay. Shariram yat avapnoti yat chapyut kramatishvaraha grihit vai tani samyati vayur gandan ivashayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another, as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Purport. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. I have to be a little careful because when it gets too long, then it's hard for Maya Purushashi to get it onto the website. I hope you're listening. I'm trying to do the best thing. Hare Krishna. So I'm going to stop here. I'm stopping on text 8 of the 15th chapter, and we'll take it up tomorrow night. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for your attention, and see you tomorrow night.